In our last video, we looked at some of the fastest construction projects ever completed in China, replacing a major bridge in just 43 hours, topping out a 57-story skyscraper in 19 days, and building a fully functional hospital in only 10 days. Those numbers shocked audiences around the world. And one question kept coming up: how is this even possible? We're breaking down the underlying system behind China's construction speed and why it consistently pushes what seems like the limits of human capability. Let's start at the very beginning of any major project: approval. In many countries, large infrastructure projects face long and complex approval processes. Multiple agencies are involved, each with its own priorities, responsibilities, and sometimes conflicting interests. As a result, projects can spend years stuck in planning before construction even begins. But in China, the process looks very different. For major projects, coordination often starts from day one. Instead of sequential approvals, multiple departments align early and move in parallel. This reduces internal friction, eliminates delays caused by bureaucratic overlap, and allows projects to break ground much faster. And that early coordination has a huge downstream effect. Take the construction of Huashinshan Hospital in Wuhan in 2020. In response to an emergency, over 7,500 workers and more than 2,000 pieces of equipment were mobilized almost overnight. Power, communications, medical systems, and building materials all arrived on schedule. Nothing waited for anything else. In many countries, if just one piece isn't ready, the entire project pauses. In China, almost everything starts at the same time. But speed doesn't just come from coordination. It also depends on what happens behind the scenes. China is the only country in the world with a complete industrial system covering every category defined by the United Nations. In many parts of the world, building a project is like assembling a puzzle, except every piece comes from a different country. Steel from one place, equipment from another, critical components delayed for months. If one piece is missing, everything stops. But in China, the system works in reverse. From small components like bolts and rebar to massive industrial equipment, most of what's needed is produced within the same ecosystem. That leads to one crucial advantage: projects don't slow down because of supply chains. And once supply becomes predictable, construction itself begins to change. Traditionally, buildings are constructed piece by piece on site, but increasingly in China, they're manufactured. For example, in a project in Changsha, over 90% of the building components were prefabricated in factories, then transported and assembled on site. The process starts to look less like construction and more like assembly. The same approach is used in emergency builds in cities like Shenzhen, where most of the structure is completed in advance and rapidly put together. The moment construction shifts from on-site building to factory production, speed doesn't just improve, it jumps to a completely different level. Because on-site delays, adjustments, and trial and error are largely eliminated. At the same time, speed is also being pushed forward by continuous innovation in construction technology. China's infrastructure boom is no longer driven by labor alone. It's increasingly powered by engineering breakthroughs. In Beijing, during the Sanyuan Bridge replacement, engineers used a method involving synchronized lifting and precision positioning to replace an entire bridge structure in just 43 hours, something that would typically take years elsewhere. In the Shenzhen-Zhongshan Link project, engineers developed a technique using massive steel cylinders to rapidly create an artificial island. 57 giant cylinders were installed in just 8 months, cutting years off the timeline. Meanwhile, advanced tunnel boring machines like the Linghang Shield have set world records for large diameter tunneling, enabling fast and safe construction in complex underwater environments. These innovations don't just improve efficiency, they fundamentally change what's possible. And then there's the human factor. China has one of the largest and most specialized construction workforces in the world, with millions of engineers and tens of millions of skilled workers. These aren't just laborers. They're trained professionals who operate advanced machinery and execute highly complex construction processes. From workers building offshore structures during holidays, to engineers operating massive tunneling machines underground, to teams completing major rail station upgrades overnight, the level of coordination and execution is extremely high. This human factor is what allows every system, every technology, and every plan to actually work in reality. It's important to understand, China's construction speed isn't a miracle, and it's not something that can be easily copied. It's the result of multiple systems working together: governance, industry, technology, and workforce, all aligned in a specific way. For other countries, differences in structure and systems make full replication difficult. But there are still lessons to be learned, especially in coordination, prefabrication, and investment in construction technology. From replacing bridges in 43 hours to building hospitals in 10 days, from creating islands in months to topping out skyscrapers in weeks, China continues to redefine how fast large-scale construction can happen. And behind these numbers isn't just speed, it's an entire system built to make that speed possible. If this level of construction speed came to your city one day, what would you want built first? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. In the next video, we'll take a look at some of the most advanced engineering projects in China and how they rank globally.